With Ben Aris in Berlin. He's the editor-in-chief at BNE IntelliNews. And Ben, thanks for joining us with this breaking news. Firstly, your reaction to this news?
Yeah, it's very encouraging. It's a happy day, isn't it? That the people that have been let out of the Russian jails. Again, Evan Gershkovich has got a lot of the attention. He's this sort of celebrity, the American journalist, but it's a who's who of Russian opposition leaders that have also been released. Yashin, Karamurza, two of the heads of Navalny's regional political organization were let out. Also, Oleg Orlov, who is the founder, the former head of Memorial. Memorial is Russia's first grassroots NGO that was dealing with the Stalin era and bringing Russia to accept its awful past in those days. And these people have all been let out. And it's pretty much, they're all the most significant political prisoners in Russia. So that's extremely good news. And I think it's interesting to note that, one of the weird things about this deal is the disparity in the numbers, because normally in diplomacy, it's a tit-for-tat, one-for-one kind of trade. And I count 16 people have been released from Russian jails, and about 8 have been released from Western jails. And that's unusual. And I think in that sense, the Kremlin has made a concession here, which is also a good sign. Perhaps it's even an olive branch of some sort.
Why do you think the Kremlin has made these concessions, and why at this point where relationships between the West and Russia are so tense?
Well, it comes, I think, in the context, and this is speculation on my part, but it comes in the context of the Ukrainian war. And the Kremlin has been signaling very loudly in the last few months that it's open for talks, and that Putin's implying that he wants to bring it to an end. And of course, the relations between East and West are terrible. But Putin's offered to go back to the Istanbul deal, peace deal that was agreed with Ukraine right at the beginning of the war. And I think it's very interesting the timing of this deal, this prisoner swap, such a large and really extremely high-profile swap. Could be in the same context. It's signaling again that Putin's willing to and able to negotiate, and that he is perhaps being willing to give away some concessions to the US, because again, this is a huge feather in the cap for Biden. But it's very interesting that Putin would be willing to do this deal now. And of course, Zelensky has called for a second peace summit in November. That's going to go ahead, and the plan is to invite both Russia and China to that. And so there's a real opportunity there to at least begin, real ceasefire talks. And putting this swap into that context, I think you could take it as a sign that Russia's ready to deal.
Is this then a good step in the right direction towards, as you say, expected talks to take place in November, but at a point where Ukraine and Russia are ready to negotiate to bring to an end a war that's taken, I believe it's more than 2 years now, but taken a massive toll on both sides?
Indeed. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, for the Russians, I mean, they've got the upper hand. They've had the initiative already since the beginning of the year when the States stopped funding Ukraine for 6 months. But it's costing Russia a lot of resources, manpower. Inflation's running extremely high. That they're looking at long-term stagnation because they've been cut off from technology. And Putin's after some sort of security deal. I mean, the headline there was always that some ban on Ukraine ever joining NATO. But while he can keep it up longer than the Ukrainians can, he can't keep it up forever. And I think he's got to the point where he's happy to declare victory. He wants to take his security deal out of the upcoming negotiations. And then after that, if he gets that, then he's going to start the long, slow process of repairing the damage that's been done, trying to get the sanctions off, restarting trade, allowing technology imports in again. And so you could see this as preparing the ground. The problem is, as I said many times before, the two sides are so far apart that it's going to be very difficult to get any kind of deal out of this. But then on the Ukrainian side, I mean, Zelensky's the instigator of the second peace conference this November. And moreover, this week, he talked about holding a referendum in Ukraine, asking the Ukrainian people if they would be okay with Ukraine ceding some territory to Russia, and that's a key point because he's been flat out saying that we're not going to do that, and now he's preparing the ground for possibly giving some territory away. And if he's prepared to do that, then there is some common grounds for a negotiated deal. So things are starting to look a bit more positive in terms of actually closing a ceasefire deal.
When it comes to that ceasefire deal, what then is the role that the United States plays in this? The United States, of course, having given Ukraine so much support diplomatically and militarily.
Well, of course, the States is the main player. I mean, Putin's constant complaint is about what he calls the unipolar world, in other words, a hegemony that's run by the US. And when this whole diplomacy started just before the war, the Kremlin dealt with exclusively the White House in terms of trying to get this no NATO guarantee on Ukraine. And so the States is going to be at the table, but they're going to be facing across the table at Russia and China combined. And in this sense, Putin holds the trump card because he can just continue the war for several more years. I mean, the Russian economy is hurting, but it's in good shape. It's on a war footing, and it can keep this up for several more years. They have plenty of money. And that's not true for Ukraine. Ukraine is expecting to run out of money, men, and arms in the next 2 years. And moreover, they're facing a catastrophic winter after Russia destroyed half their power sector. So the pressure's definitely on the US side to try and, broker a deal and get something out of it. And it remains to be seen, how hard Putin is going to play at the negotiating table. But again, in the context of what happened today with these prisoners, I think Putin was going to be pragmatic, or at least he should be, if he does want to really stop this war, because this is a second opportunity to do it. And if it doesn't get done in November, then it's going to be very difficult to get to a third option because Ukraine will just be put in a progressively more difficult position.
Ben, do you think that we could see more concessions now from Russia going forward, especially after this big prisoner exchange, as you said, 16 people released from Russian jails?
No, I think that's it for the moment. I mean, he's made his gesture. It was a very spectacular one. As I say, in diplomacy, it's very unusual it being very lopsided. And again, as I said, the people who were released from Russian jails are all very significant in domestic politics. Whereas the people that were released on the Western side, they're basically a bunch of criminals. A couple of spies. The key one was Krasikov, who's an FSB agent, assassin, and who was caught. He shot someone to death here in Berlin and was doing life in jail. And I think that was actually the key name that put this whole deal turned on. The Germans played a crucial role here, letting him out. And Putin wanted him back than anybody else because he's FSB. And, Putin wants to show the FSB, which is the bedrock of his power, his grip on power in Russia. He wanted to show them that, I take care of our own, and if one of our guys is in jail, I'll get him out.
Ben Aris, always good to get your analysis. Appreciate it very much. And thank you for joining us.